All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. We are live on three platforms tonight. We're live on YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. So, for those of you joining us at all periodically throughout the night, thank you so much. Joining me tonight is our good buddy Spencer, representing Locked On Pac-12 this time, not Locked On Ducks.
Should I throw up the? Do I have to throw up the fight on to be able to talk about USC? Is that how this works? Somewhere out there, Mark Culkin is very happy.
We're going to take a deep dive into 2023 as much as a deep dive as we can. I know you probably know a decent amount about USC. Like I said, it's not specifically your team. So, the first thing I wanted to touch on is okay. What are the thoughts and the outlook of Lincoln Riley heading into year two? And does the fan base like where the team is at?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to not like where they're at. I mean, they're the preseason favorites. Pac-12 preseason media polls just came out, and USC is a definitive favorite. ESPN Football Power Index has USC as a definitive favorite. And when you look at USC's schedule, it is tough. It is definitely a challenge of sorts. I think it's kind of a don't let the door hit you on the way out from George Kliavkoff and company. It's like, yeah, sorry about that, but also I'm not sorry because, screw you guys a little. But I think for USC and Lincoln Riley, they're in a place where, they're where they expected to be when they hired him, which is, yeah, of course we should be a conference favorite. Yeah, of course we should be contending to win the Pac-12. Yeah, of course we should, be able to have ourselves in a situation where not making the conference championship game would be a massive letdown. And they make it in year one. I didn't expect them to. I thought they'd be a 9-3 team last year. They squeaked out a couple of close wins, and they were able to go 11-1. They lose their last two games of the year, but they looked really, really good, and they should be really, really good again. Now, the question with a Lincoln Riley coach team, it's always going to be the defense, but in the context of a conference championship, all the time people will say, they can't win, their defense stinks. The dude won 3 Big 12 championships, if memory serves, and he didn't have a good defense over at Oklahoma either. Well, the Big 12 doesn't play any defense. Neither does the Pac-12 compared to, big boy defenses in college football. Like, this is an offensive sport. This is an offensive quarterback-driven league, and USC has the best quarterback and probably the best offense in the entire league. So that puts them in a good position, and if their defense can be just okay, then they will probably win the Pac-12, but that's not a given because there are other good teams that are capable of doing it. Utah, 2-time defending champs. USC hasn't beaten them yet under Lincoln Riley. They went 0-2. Washington brings back Michael Penix and a bunch of great receivers. Oregon has Bo Nix back and has made some upgrades on the defensive side of the ball. So I think USC should be the favorite, but I don't see them as a runaway favorite per se, like Clemson has been over the years in the ACC. I don't think they're at that level, but they are very, very good, and they have the best player in the country.
They absolutely do. And your point with the defense, it makes me wonder, what did Tulane do? Because Tulane was not supposed to be able to beat USC in the Cotton Bowl.
I mean, they were the line on the game was close, if memory serves. I believe it was like a single-digit line or so. So the betting markets told you that they thought Tulane was a good football team, and also probably that USC overachieved by going 11-1, which in year one I think that they did. But again, it's the same story. Like, why hasn't Lincoln Riley been in a national championship game yet? Because his defenses haven't been good enough. That's not holding him back from winning a conference title. That's not holding him back from getting to the playoff. It's holding him back from winning a national championship, which in college football, that is a high, elite, top 0.01% first-class problem. to have. Like, oh, well, we couldn't get to a national championship game. There aren't that many coaches that are held to that standard. It's, Nick Saban, Lincoln Riley, Urban Meyer when he's coaching, Ryan Day now at Ohio State, Dabo Swinney, Kirby Smart. Is there any other coach that we're holding to that standard? I don't think that standard.
Right. I don't think there's another one currently. I think Jim Harbaugh at Michigan is trending in that direction. Because he's making the right moves over there.
Now that I think that's a good call. Because now that he's been in the playoff back-to-back years, we're always thinking about, what's next, how do you progress, how do you get better, what's the next step? Next step for him would be national championship. I don't think he's the sort of coach you look at and say, we don't think he had a good season unless he gets to the national championship game. But I do feel that I think you're right, that he's kind of migrating into that sort of area.
So speaking of USC's best player, can or will Caleb Williams win the Heisman again and be the first back-to-back two-time winner since Archie Griffin?
Can, yes, absolutely. He has the talent, he has the team around him, he has the platform, and he has the coach. Lincoln Riley has generated 3 of the last, 5 Heisman Trophy winners? I mean, it's been Bryce Young, Devontae Smith, Joe Burrow won it in there, and then you had Kyler and Baker. So that's 3 of the last 6. So when Lincoln Riley is coaching, and Jalen Hurts, I believe, was a Heisman finalist.
Yeah,
his quarterback is almost guaranteed to be in the Heisman conversation, and that's amplified when you've already won it the year before. So that's the first part. Second part, was it a flash in the pan, or does he have sustainable talent? I'm going with the latter. I don't think I'm in the minority there for the number 1 overall pick in 2024. So he has that. Does he have what he needs around him? Yeah, he's got Mario Williams. They lost Jordan Addison, but they bring in Dorian Singer from USC. You have Brendan Rice. You have Michael Jackson III. Those are great receivers. A really, really good cadre of guys to have around him. And then are you going to be able to put up the numbers that you need? And the answer, again, is yes. And so the answer of will he win it is different than can he win it. The pieces are there, but you only need about 40 things to go right to win a Heisman Trophy, right? Like, you have to stay healthy. You have to be productive. Your team has to win at some sort of level. And remember, Williams was able to win it last year without winning the Pac-12 because the prior season, USC was 4-8. And so Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley going there and transforming them into an 11-1 program and playing at the level that he did was a good enough story. But not winning the Pac-12 this year and missing the college football playoff, I don't think it would keep him out of being a finalist. It could prevent him from winning it, I think.
Yes, I think you're looking at the almost like Tim Tebow effect or Deshaun Watson effect.
Like where you're just expecting them to play at such a high level that they have to up it even more. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I see that, but I think with him it's warranted because I think the Heisman Trophy and any award now, there's a narrative component, but your team has always had to be good. Your team has always had to be relevant for the most part. And look, maybe that's why Christian McCaffrey didn't win the Heisman. Maybe it was East Coast bias. It's probably a little bit of both. That was a very good Stanford team. They won the Rose Bowl, but that was not the same as being, in the college football playoff, for instance.
Right.
So I think that all factors in. And, I was talking with a buddy of mine like last week about this. He's a big Texas fan, and he likes a long shot bet on Xavier Worthy to win the Heisman. And I'm like, you can donate your money to a sports book any point in time because I think preseason Heisman bets It's like trying to pick a winner in a golf tournament. It's a sucker's bet. I just think it is, because you don't just have a lot of different guys that could win. There's so much that can change between now and the end of the season. Who had Joe Burrow on their Heisman radar in 2019? Anybody? Did you?
I don't think so.
No, nobody did. I hadn't even heard of Joe Burrow because he was just a quarterback at LSU who, I'd maybe watched a little bit. Like, I didn't know anything about him. And then by the time the season comes to a close, he goes from Heisman irrelevancy to the outright undisputed Heisman Trophy winner. That's a lot of ground that you just made up there. And why I'd say, look, if I were required to bet a preseason, I don't even know if I would go with Caleb Williams. If I were required to, I don't know, Blake Corum at Michigan, but he's got Donovan Edwards there.
The production's not there.
Yeah, but this is why. This is why I just wouldn't make that sort of bet, because so much can change and so many things have to go right for you, including, by the way, you have to stay healthy.
You bring up a good point, and Caleb Williams seems to be the exception. Now, of course, one or two plays goes USC's way in certain games. They're in the playoff. But ever since the creation of the BCS championship game, and especially the playoff, it seems like the Heisman has become the trophy that goes to the best player that is either playing in the national championship game in the BCS era, or has a chance to play for the BCS championship or the national championship game since the playoff era. I mean, you've got Caleb Williams, you've got Johnny Manziel, and you've got RG3 as the big exceptions.
Yeah, and you make a good point. That has to be a statistical season or a performance that is exemplary. Possible, probably not for a non-quarterback, but I think when you look at what has made up Heisman winners, it's often been the best player on the best team. Mm-hmm. Like Derrick Henry won the Heisman Trophy because he was the best player on the best team. He wasn't the best player in all of college football. He was a very good one. He was not the best player. Christian McCaffrey was the best player. But guess who had more attention? Guess who's in the national championship picture? Guess who won the national championship that year, I think? Derrick Henry in Alabama. And that shouldn't play into it because it's an individual award, but it does play into it. And so if you're going to have a discussion about, the Heisman Trophy and whether or not Williams can get it done again, the narrative has to be there. And I think going from 4 to 11 wins, that was enough of a narrative and a story to give it to him, combined with his exceptional play. But this year, I think they'd have to make the playoff.
Now, the last piece on this I want to bring up to you is, do you think that Caleb Williams almost kind of lucked into the Heisman in the sense of it was really a neck and neck between Caleb and CJ Stroud until CJ had that crappy game against Michigan, and then he just kind of ran away with it?
No, I don't think so. Stroud had a great season. Even if, Ohio State ended up getting to the playoff. So it's not like they weren't in the national championship discussion. I think Williams was the better overall player. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna pull up their stats real quick, but I think that Caleb Williams still was a little bit better. Stroud threw for under 3,700 yards last year. Mm-hmm. Caleb Williams was over 4,000, and Caleb Williams gives you more on the ground than C.J. Stroud, who only ran for 100 yards. So I think even if they'd beaten Michigan and been to the playoff as an undefeated team, I think that the gap between Williams' performance individually, when you're talking about stats, and the gap between USC's team and Ohio State's team, I think it was larger on the individual side, and that would have come down to, this is an individual award, and we're giving it to the best player, and I think Caleb Williams was the best player that year, and I think he was going to win that one no matter what.
You're saying the gap was big enough, basically, even if
I think there was enough of a gap between Williams and Stroud to where if Ohio State's team had done that much better and gotten to the playoff as an undefeated team, it would not have tilted the scales to overcome the gap between Stroud and Williams.
Right. So let's get into a little bit of schedule discussion.
Yes, I love schedule talk.
So the big thing here is USC capable of making the college football playoff? Do they have all the pieces in place to do it this year? And I mean, if we look at the schedule itself and kind of break it down, I think everything's there. Honestly, I have them as a playoff team in my playoffs.
Yeah, I don't have a Pac-12 team making the playoff this year. I think it is going to be rinse and repeat. Pac-12 is going to cannibalize itself. Now, here's the challenge. like the back half of USC's schedule is
so hard,
borderline. Like it's honestly so deliberately tough. It's hard to have any other takeaway other than they don't want USC to make the playoff on their way out. And by the way, if you're the Pac-12, that's the correct approach.
Right.
You don't want USC making the playoff and then leaving. That you don't want USC winning the Pac-12 and then leaving, because that weakens the perception of your conference further, right? That makes you look even worse. So the back half of the schedule, like at Notre Dame, Utah, who they lost to twice last year, at Cal, and then Washington, Oregon, UCLA. I don't know that you could concoct a tougher 6-game stretch. Now, conversely, the beginning of their schedule is a cakewalk. It is cupcake central. Not that they're playing non-FBS schools, but I think they're hovering in the 30-point favorite range against San Jose State. Mm-hmm. That's not going to be a problem. Nevada's their other non-conference, so a couple of Mountain West schools. Again, not going to be a problem. Stanford might be the worst team in the Pac-12. Arizona State and Colorado might be in some order the 10th and 11th best teams in the Pac-12. So you play what I think will be the 3 bottom teams in the Pac-12 to start conference play. Then you play a sneaky tough team in Arizona. I suspect they'll be okay because they're at home. But then they'll be 6-0 at that point, most likely.
Yeah.
And then it's a gauntlet. That is just an absolute positive gauntlet. Between at Oregon and at Notre Dame, you're probably losing one of those games. And then you have Washington, UCLA, and Utah all at home. I think they'll be fine against Cal. But even though they're at home, USC's home field advantage is not something to write home about. Like, it's a nice stadium. It's in a beautiful setting. I've been to it before. But it is not some rowdy, ruckus environment. I was there in 2019 for the USC-Oregon game, and USC was a good but not great team. You know, they'd taken a little step back from their Rose Bowl time with Sam Darnold under Clay Helton, but I think they ended the year like 8-5, and they lost their bowl. You see, you know, they were respectable. They just weren't great. And I mean, it's not that the stadium was just like totally empty or anything, but it was not completely full. And I think they just have an older fan base for the most part. So they're just not very rabid. So when you see USC playing at home, it's more an advantage for them to not be on the road than it is for them to be at home. Whereas Oregon, Utah, Washington, Colorado, Colorado's got great fans. When those teams are playing at home, it's a double whammy in that you're not on the road and you're in front of your home fans. But USC, like, it's a fine, like, it's better than UCLA's, but it's not some place that you just dread going into, or quarterback isn't going to hear himself at the line of scrimmage or anything. There will be noise. There will be fans, but it won't be. It's not one of the top home field advantages in the Pac-12. I'd put Oregon, Washington, Utah, and Colorado all ahead. Probably when things are going right, the Arizona schools I think are more ruckus than USC. But that'll be the stretch. And the other thing you have to consider, and why I don't see them making the playoff, is you have that 6-game stretch: Notre Dame, Utah, at Cal, Washington, Oregon, UCLA. They miss Oregon State. That's a bonus for them, right? You talk about the teams that you miss, in the scheduling rotation from the old Pac-12 North and South. Missing Oregon State, a team that should have beaten them last year, that's a bonus. But you look at that 6-game stretch and say, boy, 5-1 would be really, really good, which it would be. Mm-hmm. And then you have to play the Pac-12 championship game, where you're probably going to play one of Oregon, Washington, Utah, or Oregon State, if you end up getting there. So that's why I can't see the Pac-12 getting a team to the playoff this year, is I just feel like there are a lot of good teams. But is there a dominant team? Is there a really great team? I don't see it. I think Washington and Oregon are really good. I think Utah's really good. I think USC's really good. I don't think any are dominant enough to go through their entire schedule with just one loss, especially USC, who have their non-conference matchup at Notre Dame. Washington, there's a little bit more of a feasible case because their non-conference game is at Michigan State. They're on the road and they're a double-digit favorite. So they should be just fine. And they were, winning that game comfortably at home a season ago. So that's why I can't see the Pac-12 getting into the playoff. Not because the league isn't good. It's very good. I just don't see who the dominant team is.
So if you're a USC fan, and you've got USC, you've got Utah, Washington, and Oregon likely to be the 4 that kind of, how'd you put it, eat each other?
Cannibalize.
Yeah, cannibalize each other.
Right, eating their own.
So let's say that USC loses one of those back 6 stretch games. If you're Lincoln Riley and USC after you've lost to whether it's Utah, Washington, Oregon, are you hoping and praying that whoever you lost to makes it to the Pac-12 championship, and that way maybe you set yourself up like a 2018 Oklahoma under Lincoln Riley, where they lost to Texas and then made up for their loss by beating Texas in the Big 12 championship?
That's a really interesting thought. And, as a fan of a team, I think it's easy to go back and forth with that sort of stuff. I think it depends on which team you're talking about. Because if I'm USC, the team that I want to play among the conference contenders is Washington. Because Washington is built in the same mold as the Trojans. Now, Washington's got a better defensive line. They have a couple of really, really good edge players. But a year ago, Washington won shootouts. They scored a lot of points. They allowed, They allowed 39 or greater or more points to both of the Arizona schools, who both finished under 500. So that's a team that is driven by their offense. That's driven by their quarterback, because they have great receivers, they have a great quarterback, they have a good offensive line. And USC is very similar in that sense. So if I'm the Trojans, I'm looking at, okay, well, who beat me last year? Right? Who got the bet? It was Utah. What style of football does Utah play? They can exploit. They're a smash-mouth physical team, and I think Oregon is somewhere in the middle of those sorts of styles of, air it out but also be physical. I think that those are the sorts of things you look for in, with the thought in the back of your mind of like, oh, okay, who do I want to play, right? Who is the best chance for me to beat? Because Washington is trying to beat you at your own game, while, Utah, for instance, or Oregon State. And remember, Oregon State was a Reggie Bush-style push away on 4th down of Caleb Williams from beating them in Corvallis. And what does Oregon State do? Run the football, power football, led by their defense. So that's the matchup stylistically I think you want to avoid if you're USC, because that's what gave you the most trouble a season ago. And so I would rather play Oregon or Washington, probably Washington. I think Oregon, with a defensive head coach, is probably more likely to have greater success on that side of the ball, so to speak. And Oregon also, but Oregon also likes to run the football quite a bit. I don't know. That's a toss-up. But I think that's the calculation. If you're thinking about it as a fan or as, someone just kind of looking at the games from the outside, is like, what are the matchups and how do you fare? But I also want to see these games play out first before we, can make a final determination on, okay, this is who you should want to play for USC.
Yes, and our resident Irish fan, Will M.D., says, I think they lose, hopefully, to Notre Dame and probably Oregon. Autzen is going to be definite.
Yeah, yeah. I talk to a lot of Oregon fans all the time, and I can assure you they're already fired up for that game. They're already fired up. They would love nothing more than to send USC with a loss on their way out of the conference. Because it could be the last time USC plays Oregon for a long time, so a lot of bragging rights on the line there. Like, Autzen is always loud. It is always ferocious. They're going to have an extra gear for USC and for Oregon State as well.
Now, obviously, my thinking is the ceiling is undefeated playoffs. Would you say that the floor is probably about 8-4, 9-3? Because potentially,
Oh, I think the floor is at least 9-3.
I'm thinking either the back six scares me to a degree. I mean, obviously, Cal, you can just write that in. That's a check.
See, but the front six doesn't scare me at all for USC.
Right. It all
that should be 6-0 without even like a tight game in there. Arizona has the best chance to give them a game, but it's not in Tucson. So I'm not saying they can sleep on Arizona. They cannot. Arizona will play spoiler for somebody this year as they did for UCLA a year ago. But that's the only game that could even be close. Mm-hmm. I could realistically see USC playing 6 straight games where they win by 2 touchdowns or more every single week. That is entirely possible.
Yeah, I'm thinking outside of Cal and probably UCLA, since they don't have DPR now.
I'm low on UCLA this year.
I think your 3 losses come somewhere between Notre Dame, Utah, Washington, and Oregon.
If you're taught, the reason I say 9-3 is like the baseline floor, because I don't expect them to lose any of those first 6 games.
Oh yeah,
and I don't expect them to lose to Cal. So now we're looking at the other 5. I think UCLA is a pullback team this year, so I think that is also a win. So now we're down to 4 games, right? Mm-hmm. And if those are 4 games that, according to the betting markets, and also just how I see it as well, those are toss-ups at some level, games where you can reasonably see a team winning or losing, it's hard to see how they don't win at least 2 of them. I mean, if you look at their close games last year, Tulane, they lost. Utah, they lost. They didn't have any other really close games, right? They were just beating everybody kind of comfortably. Arizona and Cal, kind of pushed them a little bit, but they were mostly fine. So I feel like with the Trojans, it's down to those 4 games, and I don't think they're going to win all of them, but they're not going to lose all of them either. And 1-3, I don't know how good Notre Dame's going to be this year. Maybe our Notre Dame friend can help us out there, but 1-3, even though it's a tough slate, when you have 2 at home and 2 on the road, I don't know if I'd see them going 1-3. I think 2-2 at least. Oh, yeah. I could see. I agree with you. Their ceiling is going 13-0 and making the playoff. Again, that's their ceiling. I don't think they'll hit that, but that's what their ceiling is as a team and a program this year. Mm-hmm. And I think the most likely outcome is 2-2 or 3-1 in those 4 kind of season-defining games.
The question is, where do the losses come? Because I mean, if you want to focus on those 4, and I know we're kind of low on time, but if you want to focus on those 4, I think Notre Dame is probably built good enough to where they can probably push USC. I just don't know if they have all the right pieces to beat USC.
Yeah.
Utah, as you stated in the beginning, is
at Notre Dame is key, though.
Yes, it's on the road.
At Notre Dame is important there. If that game's in LA like it was last year. And I think last year was a semi-close game. I think USC like kind of sort of pulled away at the end of it, but Notre Dame was playing better football as the year went on. But that game was 38-27. Like I think USC had kind of kept them at like an arm's length for most of the game, and that's where it ended up being. But could I see that? Could I see Notre Dame winning that game in South Bend? Yeah, sure. If they're having a good season, I could see it.
Yeah, it almost comes up to where are they at when they get there.
Yeah, and how are you playing? How are you playing when you get there? All about the big momentum.
Yeah, so I mean, at this moment, I would probably give USC the Notre Dame game. I would probably say Utah still has USC's number. So I think that's where one of your losses will come from. And then it comes down to Washington, Oregon. I think the fact that it's at Oregon is going to play a big key into it. I think if USC is going to slip up and cause them not to make the playoff, that's going to be the game right there. Because I think as good as Washington is, I really think USC has enough power on the offense to counteract Washington's offense.
Well, yeah, because like I said, Washington's trying to beat USC at their own game, essentially, win a shootout. Whose offense do I like more? I lean USC. I might think that Washington has the best individual receiver, but USC's got the best quarterback, and he can do more than Michael Penix can, who is a very good player. But I'm not going to bet against Caleb Williams. I'm not going to bet against Lincoln Riley in that sort of setting. But you give me a team like a Utah, you give me a team like in Oregon, that game in Autzen Stadium will be really, really tough. Fortunate to miss Oregon State this year, and we saw why with the way that game played out in Corvallis a season ago. But yeah, gosh, now I'm just ready for football. Just give me some damn football already.
It's almost there.
Almost.
Got like almost 5 weeks left.
I haven't counted the Saturday. This is the last calendar month without college football. I think 5 weeks is about right. 5-6 weeks. We're close. We're close.
So close.
Yeah.
Well, I know this one was shorter. I don't know. Oh, hold on. UCLA has a much easier road than USC. USC should be more banged up by the end of the season.
I'll get out of here on this comment because I have two thoughts here. First of all, the Super Smash Bros. Logo is peak. That's outstanding. It's one of the greatest games ever.
Oh, yeah.
Secondly, he's not wrong. UCLA's schedule is really easy. It's one of the if I liked their team more, I would pick them as more capable of contending for a Pac-12 title, but I just think there are too many quarterback questions because I still don't know who's starting for them. And in this league, I don't know if you can get by with that. So I feel like that's what's going to hold UCLA back is, they'll have good quarterback play because Chip Kelly knows how to coach them up, but you can't have what you had a year ago with DTR. They're going to take a step back. And look, their new defensive coordinator, we'll see what he's able to do. But I've seen Chip Kelly defenses more than a few times. Like, it's going to be about the offense and the quarterback play, and I just don't know what they can get there. But anyway, I'll end on that. Always good to talk to you, man. I got to bounce.
All right, man. See you next time.
Yep. See ya.
And as I get ready to close this out here, that was our good buddy Spencer. You can catch him on Locked On Pac-12 and Locked On Ducks, discussing college football and Oregon football and Oregon sports on the daily and the conference as a whole on the daily. I hope everyone enjoyed this live stream. Don't forget, comment, like, and subscribe. We are over 115 subs. We are pushing and chugging along to 500 subs. That is the goal, that by the end of the football season, we want to be at 500 subs. So please, on YouTube. So please comment, like, and subscribe. And spread the word of the awesome, awesome channel. I hope y'all enjoyed the condensed show tonight. And you have a good one as well, Mike3883. We will see you on the next one. So stay tuned. And thank you very much.